Well, he's gone and done it, folks. That's right. He's gone and done it. President Cyril Ramaphosa today, December 20th, 2024, has delivered the most vile and repulsive Christmas present that the people of South Africa could ever hope for. The idiotic Basic Education Laws Amendment Act is fully implemented as of today. In a statement released this afternoon, the presidency spokesman Vincent Magwenya said Ramaphosa's decision follows report from Deputy President Paul Mashatile's Clearinghouse Mechanism Committee, the same Paul Mashatile in multiple accused corruption scandals who still sits in office and has amassed a significant amount of wealth and lives in very opulent mansions despite the fact he's never held a job. Now, Ramaphosa said, I accordingly advised them that I would proceed to sign a presidential proclamation to bring the Basic Education Laws Amendment Act into operation from today. I've instructed the Minister of Basic Education, Siviwe Garuba from the Democratic Alliance, to see the full implementation of the BELA Act. I've also instructed the Minister of Basic Education to do what's necessary, as is customary with any law, to ensure that the time frame and implementation, particularly with regard to the preparedness of the system for universal grade R access and the consequential regulations setting out the norms and standards, are prepared. Well, Ramaphosa also said all bodies and officials responsible for the implementation of this act are required at all times to act in accordance with the Constitution, the law, and relevant policies and regulations. Now, why would that be? Well, probably because the Democratic Alliance's stated position to this abomination is opposition. Will this be the Rubicon? Has Ramaphosa crossed the Rubicon? Will this be the straw that breaks the camel's back, the proverbial camel, in the government of national unity? Well, don't hold your breath, folks. This is where we reveal the Democratic Alliance for what they really are: political grifters who are only interested in craving political power, self-aggrandizement, and self-enrichment, not actually governing South Africa. Ooh, that sounded harsh. Maybe it was. The point here with the Democratic Alliance is that their true colors will be revealed. They stood in strong opposition to this, and then they've gone quiet for the most part since they became part of the governing body of South Africa. What happens going forward? Well, here's a few problems with this law. Number one, it criminalizes parents when their children are truant from school. This is horrific. Most South Africans can barely afford to get their kids to school and often pay exorbitant amounts of money to stick them in buckies to transport them to a school. If a child is not present in school, the police can now rock up and arrest the parents and imprison them. This is the same sort of idiocy that led to Australia being populated, when England placed tens of thousands of English citizens in prisons for their inability to pay their debt. Well, they're not going to pay it when they're in prison, and parents aren't going to be able to make sure their kids are in school while they're fined and or in prison. This is an abomination and abuse of the law and not the role of the government. Isn't it interesting how the African National Congress, who preaches to us all the time their African origins, the Africanness and African this and African that, implements a wholly Western concept of forced compulsory education for children, which never existed. There were no such systems before Europeans arrived in Southern Africa, yet the African National Congress gleefully embraces that and compulsorily forces kids to go to school. Now, I think children should be in school. I'm not disagreeing with that, but criminalizing parents for their truant children is not the right step, particularly poor Black South Africans. The bigger issue here, of course, is what AfriForum and Solidarity have gone after. The truancy thing, the imprisonment, the criminalization of parents' behavior is something that few people have noticed, but I have noticed. But the real issue that's got much attention here is first language instruction. This is one of two things. This entire effort is part of the communist idea, the state control, the father knows best, the paternalistic, ironic, isn't it, paternalistic approach of the African National Congress to know that they are the ones who can decide for everyone else. It's very commie, it's very socialist, it's very morally bankrupt, and it is destined to be a failure. That's number one. That's what the first thing is. It's their communist tendencies. Number two, it's the racist bent within the senior leadership of the African National Congress, which is clearly hell-bent on destroying the Afrikaans-speaking white minority. And it's going to be an effort to extinguish Afrikaans as a language, the second most widely spoken first language in the country of South Africa. Ramaphosa has fully implemented this abomination. It will not stand legal review if the courts are honest, legitimate, because it violates the Constitution. It's unconstitutional. And it's an overreach of government. Why? Because they're communist and because there's plenty of racists in the ANC who see Afrikaans as a colonial language, even though it's an African language, spoken first by former slaves and Khoi and mixed race folks in the Western Cape. who mixed the Dutch with everything else. And look what you got. The BELA bill, fully implemented. Lawsuits coming tomorrow. Papers will probably be dropped on December 21st. It's this weekend, but they'll be prepared. And if the courts are closed, the moment they open, those papers will be there to oppose this idiotic legislation by an out of control party that has lost favor with the public. And they just can't accept that they're no longer the biggest party and most popular party. They're still the biggest, at least with vote tallies. South Africa, rough times ahead. What say you, folks?